Moments ago, Don Lemon was released on bond after appearing in court. So CBS News chief correspondent Matt Gutman joining us live from Los Angeles. And Matt, I know you were in the courtroom, so tell us about the charges and the government's arguments.
You know, first, Juliet, Don Lemon came in. He was still wearing the same suit he was wearing last night, preparing for the Grammys, this cream-colored suit, double-breasted. He had glasses on, and he scanned the gallery, and he did see some familiar faces, friends, his husband, LA Mayor Karen Bass, sketch artist, lots of press, a huge amount of interest. But I think what struck me most, this is a preliminary hearing. Typically, it is pro forma. But there was something we heard when the prosecution, which is the government, was asking for him to have bail set at $100,000, to have certain restrictions on his travel. And this is how they justified it, by saying he was part of a conspiracy and a group that knowingly joined a mob, and that Lemon himself knowingly joined a mob to terrorize people during a church worship service. That shows you how the government is viewing this case. Obviously, Lemon and his team dispute that, and eventually the judge agreed with them to some degree. She said there will be no bond. He will be released to his own recognizance. There will be certain limits to his international travel, but not many to his national travel, and mostly he'll be free to go about his business. In fact, he walked out of court, and we got to hear him because he addressed reporters for a short time very defiantly.
Last night, the DOJ sent a team of federal agents to arrest me in the middle of the night for something that I've been doing for the last 30 years, and that is covering the news. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects that work for me and for countless of other journalists who do what I do. I stand with all of them, and I will not be silenced. I look forward to my day in court. Thank you all.
And so his day in court, Juliet, will be February 9th, back in Minneapolis. He was just apprehended here, and that's why he had his first preliminary hearing here. He will be staying in New York. This could go on for some time. We understand Lemon just left in a car. There was one other thing that he said, that now is the most important time for a free and independent media, and that is something that you hear echoed nationally. The National Press Club also weighing in, saying that this indictment against Lemon and Georgia Ford, who we also saw live streaming her indictment, could have a chilling effect on journalists across the country and on free speech and the First Amendment, Juliet.
All right, Matt Gutman. Matt, thanks so much. We want to take you to Los Angeles, where journalist Don Lemon spoke moments ago after being granted bond.
And that is covering the news. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects that work for me and for countless of other journalists who do what I do. I stand with all of them, and I will not be silenced. I look forward to my day in court. Thank you all.
CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins me now. Jessica, never a dull day. Let's talk about the protections here of the First Amendment, because we've got freedom of the press and we've got freedom of religion. So how should we think about this case?
This is a great question. So the first thing to remember is that the First Amendment, whether or not it be the freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, protects us against the government. So on the one hand, we have Don Lemon, who I think is going to make a First Amendment argument here that this case, in fact, infringes on his right, not just as a member of the press, but as somebody who's protected under the freedom of speech. The idea that the government shouldn't target you because they don't like who you are, what you're saying, what your viewpoint is. On the other hand, when it comes to the freedom of religion, we have a statute that's based on the idea that people shouldn't interfere with other people's worshipers' constitutional rights to worship as they see fit. And in fact, the statute talks about preventing people's access into a place of worship. So what we have here are allegations that there are people, including Don Lemon, who are engaging in a conspiracy. The complaint details all of these overt acts that allegedly Don Lemon and others took to prevent people from being able to go into a house of worship. And then we have Don Lemon, as you said, on the other hand, saying, but my First Amendment rights will be trampled on if the government goes ahead with this prosecution.
Could this set a precedent in essentially treating journalists like protesters?
So a couple of things. I think it could set a precedent in terms of whether or not journalists think twice before they cover events. It could set a chilling precedent for everyone who is protected by the First Amendment in gaining access to information, gathering information, disseminating information. I do think that there tends to be some confusion about whether or not members of the press are entitled to additional protections. And I think that really what we're talking about is, does Don Lemon get the same protection as anybody else who's entitled to the freedom of speech? Here, I don't know that it actually makes that much of a difference if he's a member of the press. The question is what he's doing. Is it a protected activity?
Okay, Jessica Levinson, we'll be calling on you again on this. Fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, fellow journalists as well as civil rights and free press advocates are reacting to Don Lemon's arrest. His former network CNN released a statement expressing concern about press freedom, saying, quote, "The First Amendment in the United States protects journalists who bear witness to news and events as they unfold." The state goes on to say, quote, "The DOJ's attempts to violate those rights is unacceptable." The NAACP also released a statement in support of Lemon and others arrested in connection with the church protests, calling this a, quote, "blatant assault on the First Amendment." The organization's president warned, quote, "If Donald Trump doesn't like what you're saying or doing, he will weaponize the federal government to come after you." The Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press also called it unprecedented for the Justice Department to deploy federal laws against journalistic activity. I want to bring in journalist and Scripps News special events anchor Allison Camerata. Allison, you were also an anchor for both CNN and Fox News. Thank you so much for being with us. You worked with Don and had a very exclusive interview with him just a few days ago for Scripps after the protest at the church in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he said he actually expected to be charged. Let's take a listen to that.
You tell me. With this administration, you don't know. Look, I'm not naive. I think they're probably going to try again and again, as they did with Tish James and Comey and everyone. If one doesn't work, then they try something else, and that fails, and they try something else, and then they just don't give up because they want to save face. But I don't know what's next. I think what's next is that I have to be in it for the long haul, and just to be strong as always, and keep calm and carry on.
Because this federal magistrate judge said that they didn't have a case, basically. The Department of Justice said that they didn't have a case. I mean, the judge said the Department of Justice didn't have a case. But you think that it's not over?
No, I think it's not over. Because it doesn't matter if there's no law to fit. They will try to fit or retrofit something or go around a judge and just do it themselves. And it doesn't matter. And everything that they say pertains to protesters. I was not a protester. I was very clear about that. If you look at all the evidence, I'm not a protester. And so I think, Allison, not that I think, I know, I was the biggest name. And so if they get a Don Lemon, woohoo, that's a victory. And also, I'm the one who put the information out there.
So, Allison, when you heard that your good friend and former colleague had been arrested, what did you think?
I woke up to that news, Liz, and I was just stunned, as are so many of our journalistic friends and people in the journalism community. It's not unprecedented, but it's very unheard of. The fact that Don was covering a protest, as he has described, in St. Paul, Minnesota on January 18th. He went into a church, which, yes, can be seen as private property, and perhaps there's a case of trespassing against him, but that doesn't normally warrant a journalist's arrest. Don is still in custody up until this afternoon. And so this is just highly unusual. And I think it sent a shockwave through all of my journalistic friends.
And as you said, Don described covering the protest at the church in St. Paul. He's using his phone. And you asked him if he thought he did anything wrong. I want to play that clip.
I have my personal feelings about it. I am a Christian. I am torn about it as a Christian and a journalist, but it's not for me to judge whether the venue's right. It's for me to just report the story, and then we can talk about whether the right venue or wrong venue, but it's up to me to chronicle what is happening in the moment.
Do you think you did anything wrong?
No, I don't, because I waited to go in. I told the folks, don't go on the property. I'm going to go check it out until if there is a disturbance, then we can go in, because they've already created a situation, I believe, that makes it reportable. And
what does that mean if there's a disturbance? If the protesters?
If the protesters did
Yeah.
that. So I said that to my crew. And so I went in just to see, and it started. And then other members of the press started coming in. And then when other members of the press started coming in, I looked over, and my guy, I guess that was a cue for him, and he came in, but I said, okay, I'll just start talking and saying, here's what's happening. But I was very strategic, and because I never got in the scrum. I got in once after I started interviewing everyone, and I let it play out, to go over to ask after, I think it was after I had spoken to the pastor and some of the churchgoers or parishioners. I went over to her and said, what do you think about what you're doing? And they're saying this, that you shouldn't be here, and blah, blah, blah. And I got her reaction, and then I stepped back away and I just let it play out. I was not chanting or cheering on. If people didn't want to talk to me, I moved on.
So Allison, I'm curious, do you think he did anything wrong? Did he cross the line here?
I mean, you heard what Don said, that he hadn't planned to go inside the church, that he followed the protesters in there when he realized that that's where all the action was and that that's where the protest was happening. It wasn't happening outside. Once he got in there, he began live streaming, and he made a point of interviewing all sides. He interviewed the pastor. He interviewed parishioners who were in there. He interviewed the protesters. So he was basically just giving his viewers an idea of how everything was unfolding inside the church. That's generally what journalists do. Whether or not he violated a trespassing law isn't for me to decide. I mean, that's up to the judge. But again, the idea that he would be arrested for that is what makes what happened today so unprecedented.
Yeah, and what message does his arrest say to other journalists?
That's exactly right, Liz. I mean, it's very hard for this not to have a chilling effect on journalists wondering what the line is. What can they do? Normally, as you well know, we cover demonstrations, we cover protests. That's part of our job. So now what's the line? How do we know that we won't be arrested? And by the way, it's not just Don Lemon. There was another journalist arrested today at the same time, last night, at the same time that Don was, as well as others who have been intimidated and threatened. So it is a very confusing time to be practicing journalism.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting, Don Lemon is now an independent journalist. There are more independent journalists now more than ever just using their cell phones to get close to stories. Many have called Nick Shirley a journalist, and all journalists should be protected under the First Amendment. But do you think that line is getting blurred with this style of reporting?
Definitely. I mean, I know that viewers are confused about who is a real journalist, who can they trust, because as you say, once you have a cell phone, you can record things, you can stream yourself live. I talked to Don about this in our exclusive sit-down interview, which was exactly 1 week ago, when he predicted that the DOJ was going to keep coming after him. He did have a sense that at some point they would try to charge him and possibly arrest him. That's what happened. And basically, he said that you have to be trained in journalism. You have to follow the rules of journalism. Not all people with a camera are doing that. But Don still is. I mean, Don makes the argument that he is still following all of the rules of journalism that you and I learned in journalism school, and that that's what separates his independent journalism from just anybody with a camera.
Now, in this sit down with Don Lemon, you also asked him about how Nicki Minaj has inserted herself into this controversy. Minaj took aim at Lemon over the protest at the St. Paul Church on social media. She wrote in part, quote, "How dare you? I want that thug in jail." Her words, he would never do that to any other religion. Let's listen to what Don Lemon had to say about that.
To say that you're a Christian and you're calling me out as a Christian and you know, I wouldn't do that to any other religion. Does she not recall the 2012 Grammy Awards when the Catholic Church came after her, when they said her performance at the Grammys was sacrilege? When the Catholic League and all of those folks and Christians were coming after her for her egregious performance at the Grammys? She's a hypocrite. And also, reportedly, she's possibly an undocumented person. She has said that she's undocumented. She came as a child, and I don't know if she's ever registered to be a citizen. And if that is true, under those rules, which are under Donald Trump's rules, she should be picked up, detained, reported, and deported. And those are the people she's cozying up next to. The people who are protesting for the rights for people like her, who may not be documented or otherwise, immigrants in this country, and she is an immigrant. So I said, why do African Americans support her? Why do gay people support her? Members of the LGBTQ community support her? You shouldn't, because she's a homophobe and she's a racist. She's racist against, I believe, black Americans.
So, Allison, how do we get here? Don Lemon versus Nicki Minaj.
I mean, as you put up there, the tweet that she put out, which was vulgar, what she said about Don. Many people interpreted it as a homophobic slur. And then Don, as you just heard there, was not pulling his punches. He was going after her. He went after her husband at some point during that interview. You know, Don Lemon, when I worked with him at CNN for the 10 years that we worked together, I was always struck by how he had a fearless quality on the air, and he didn't shy away from controversy. And I would say that now, ever since he's left CNN and become an independent journalist, he has leaned into that more. Now he is free to say whatever he wants and to engage with anyone who insults him. And so I think that we just saw that on display with him returning fire with Nicki Minaj there.
He is not afraid to ruffle a few feathers, that's for sure. Allison, thank you so much for being with us. Congratulations on the new position at Scripps. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Liz. Great to see you.
Earlier today, former CNN anchor and independent journalist Don Lemon arrested by the feds. He's expected to appear in federal court as early as today. While we watch for that, kind of catch you up on it. You might remember the DOJ claimed that Lemon was part of this, a protest that disrupted a church service in St. Paul, Minnesota earlier this month. Now, reports say the pastor of that church was an immigration and customs enforcement official. Lemon's arrest comes the week after a federal appellate court declined an order to arrest him in connection with that protest. This is a listen to what he had to say about that decision last week.
I stand proud and I stand tall. This is not a victory lap for me because it's not over. They're going to try again and they're going to try again. And guess what? Here I am. Keep trying. That's not going to stop me from being a journalist. None of this is about justice. This is about power, and it's about people who are incompetent.
Don Lemon there. Well, our CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen asked Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about Lemon's arrest. Watch.
Do you have a reaction to the arrest of Don Lemon overnight?
Do you have a reaction to what?
To Don Lemon's arrest overnight?
Do I have a reaction to it? I don't know what that means. What are you looking for me to do? Jump up and down? No, I don't have a reaction to it. I don't know that the charges are unsealed yet. So no, I can't. I'm not going to comment on that.
So let's try to go deeper. CBS News senior coordinating producer for our crime and public safety unit, Anna Schechter, joining us live. Anna, what are you learning at this hour?
Well, I'm glad you played that clip of Jake Rosen's excellent question that garnered that reaction. Clearly, the Justice Department has been pursuing this and trying several different ways. A magistrate judge previously had declined to pursue the charges against Lemon, probably because he's a journalist. But what we know right there on your screen, he will be charged with conspiracy to deprive rights and violation of the FACE Act. So that's interfering by force of someone's First Amendment rights. And what they mean by that is First Amendment rights to participate in a religious service. So on the one hand, you've got the Justice Department saying, wait a minute, this was a church service. Disrupting that is violating the First Amendment rights of the people in that church. And why did those protesters go in there? Because the pastor is an official with ICE. And on the other side, especially Don Lemon's attorney is saying he was just exercising his own First Amendment right to be a journalist. You just saw there on the screen Pam Bondi's statement that she directed her Justice Department to make that arrest alongside 3 others in Minnesota. And there you see Abby Lowell, that's the defense attorney for Don Lemon, who says that the Trump Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest, while they should be investigating the federal agents who killed 2 peaceful Minnesota protesters. That's coming from Don Lemon's attorney there, Abby Lowell. So let's see how this plays out. This is a fascinating case. I don't remember in recent time a journalist arrested for covering an event, but this is a new era, and I'm really curious to see how this plays up and to see if this holds up in court. Reed?
What's really fascinating to me is that it looks like this is teeing up a clash of protections. Of course, institutional protections. One for religions and people who want to have the free practice of their religion within their sanctuaries. Number two, the free practice of journalists. For sure, it looks like Don Lemon's attorneys are trying to frame this as saying he needs the protection as a journalist to do what he needs to do. Do we know anything about his actions before, during, or after, either outside or inside that church, that the feds would be able to cite and say, hey, no, look, he was an incursion on the free practice of religion?
This is the heart of the matter. That's a brilliant question, Reed. And what I would like to know is, what does the government have on him being part of the planning? He has said that he covered the time leading up to the protest and then covered the protest. It appears to me that Department of Justice officials might try to put on him that he was a part of the planning to make this happen. We have not seen any of that evidence, however, so we're waiting really for an initial hearing, and this could take some time to play out in court. Obviously, his lawyer is going to fight this and try to get these charges thrown out, but we really don't know what he was doing before, so let's see what the government has. I mean, the bar is high. They would need to have a lot of information about him participating in the planning of this event, targeting a church, for example. So we'll see. This is a surprising development.
Interesting to know. And Anna, just one more question. Obviously, the feds would want to get a hold of Don Lemon's phone records, his email communications, to try to pin some coordination on him. But journalists' communications oftentimes are protected. Do you anticipate his lawyers, if the feds try to go after trying to see what he did and when he did it and who he talked to, do you get any sense that his lawyers would say, no, he's a journalist and therefore should be protected from those communications being released?
Absolutely. You can bet on Abby Lowell, who is a very well-known lawyer. He is going to 100% try to bar any reach into Lemon's personal communications, electronic communications, and let's see if it even gets to that point. But if it does, he will definitely, he is putting front and center Lemon's First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. As a member of the press covering this event, he's going to stick to that because it's a pretty strong argument. Reed.
Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and two protections going to head in the courts. Anna Schechter, this one is so fascinating to me. Thank you so much.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon is facing charges of federal civil rights violations in connection with an anti-ICE protest at a Minnesota church earlier this month. The Justice Department has accused him of interfering with the First Amendment rights of churchgoers. Lemon says he was at the demonstration exercising his own First Amendment rights as a journalist. At least 3 others were also arrested. This goes back to January 18th when anti-ICE protesters interrupted services at the city's church in St. Paul. The pastor of the church also serves as an immigration and customs enforcement official. A judge rejected previous attempts to charge Lemon last week. The Justice Department tried again this week, convening a grand jury Thursday. Attorney General Pam Bondi posted on social media after the announcement of Lemon's arrest.
Make no mistake, under President Trump's leadership and this administration, you have the right to worship freely and safely. And if I haven't been clear already, if you violate that sacred right, we are coming after you.
CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez joins us now from Los Angeles. Can you walk us back a bit about how we got here and what the Justice Department is accusing Lemon of?
Well, Lindsay, you have to start back on January 18th on that Sunday service at the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota, that turned into a protest over immigration. The service was interrupted. The scene there turned loud and confrontational. Don Lemon says that he was there to report. The government says that he was part of a coordinated disruption. Now, before Lemon was arrested, a federal judge in Minnesota refused to approve an arrest warrant, saying that federal prosecutors had not shown enough evidence to justify an arrest. That same judge also noted that Lemon and his producer were being treated as protesters without proof that they had done anything illegal. Prosecutors ended up appealing, but the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals did not change the ruling. So prosecutors went around that to a grand jury, and after that arrest, the Attorney General Pam Bondi spoke out saying that this case is about protecting the right to worship and not about silencing the press.
Another independent journalist, Georgia Fort, was also arrested but released earlier. Why was she released, and have we heard from her?
Georgia Fort was released after a judge determined that she did not need to remain in custody as the case moves forward. The court found that she was not a flight risk and did not pose a danger, clearing the way for her release under standard conditions. After walking out, Fort was very emotional, as you can imagine, saying that the experience was terrifying and exhausting, but that she stands by her innocence. She also believes that this case will ultimately collapse and ended up thanking family, friends, and supporters who have been by her side.
What have we heard from Lemon and his lawyers?
Well, Lemon and his legal team insist that he is being targeted for his job as a journalist. His attorney calls the case an unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and, quote, a transparent attempt to silence a journalist for doing his job, stressing that Lemon has spent the last 3 decades in journalism and that his conduct at the church was routine news gathering protected by the Constitution. Lemon himself has said that he had no role in organizing the protest, that he was not part of the group that disrupted the service, and that he was simply documenting a newsworthy event involving immigration policy and law enforcement. Their message in court filings and in public statements is that if this kind of reporting can be criminalized, it can send a chilling signal to newsrooms everywhere.
Andres Gutierrez, thank you. CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen joins me now. Jake, a judge had rejected bringing charges against Lemon. So how did we get here?
Well, Lindsay, we got here because there was this kind of back and forth between Lemon and these protesters, and this judge found that the Department of Justice simply had just not done enough in this case to warrant just a simple magistrate judge signing off on these arrest warrants. There was an appeal over the weekend, and 3 federal judges in Minnesota had denied that, saying that the Department of Justice had not convened a grand jury and had not tried all legal avenues. What we do know, according to CBS News sources, was that the Department of Justice did convene a grand jury yesterday in the state, and that's how this indictment came down today. It has not yet been unsealed, but we're expecting it to be after Lemon's initial appearance in any matter of moments. Okay, and we did just learn that he was granted bond, so more to come on that. We also learned today the FBI is now in charge of the investigation into Alex Preddy's death in Minnesota. What happened? What changed? Well, there was a press conference with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche where he kind of backtracked on what we had been reporting here at CBS News previously, which is that there had been no civil rights investigation into the situation on Saturday, the tragic situation in which Alex Preddy was shot and killed. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche downplayed the scope of this investigation, and he said that it was in its preliminary stages. He did not want to get ahead of it, refused to comment on details. But what this does do, Lindsay, is potentially opens the door for the Justice Department to potentially bring charges against those officers that are accused of not just detaining Preddy, but then later shooting him. As we know, 2 officers fired their guns in that incident, according to our CBS News analysis and law enforcement officials. Okay, Jake Rosen, thank you.